First of all, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jason Jimenez. We are on the Bold Saviors, making the impossible possible in business. And today I have a very dear friend of mine by the name of Ram Castillo. He is thousands of miles away, and I haven't talked to him in about a year or so, but I follow him almost every day, or at least when he posts, and I'm happy to say that we are honored to have him today. And Ram, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you, Jason. A pleasure to be here. Can't wait to dive into some conversation with you.
Yeah, no, and so the Bull Saviors is all about the journey. And I could tell you that we met during the pandemic. And I got to learn from you. I've got to understand what made you tick. And during that time, you were in a realm of branding, and that was a big part of your life at the time. But before we get into that and that segment, I'd love to understand a little bit about where you came from. Like, how did, you're in Australia, right? So how did you get there? Were you born there? I mean, like, give me the little backstory about who is Ram.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Ram. I'm based in Sydney, Australia at the moment, and have been since I was one. So I migrated from the Philippines. I was born in Manila, and my story begins before me, as does most people. I have had the unique upbringing of my dad being one of 11 siblings and my mum being one of five. And growing up for them was very tough. And I often reflect on the life they had. For example, my dad, his father passed away when he was 3, and his mother passed away when he was like 19, when he was in uni. Education seemed to be the way out for somewhat of a better life. My dad finished marine transportation and mechanical engineering. We get to Australia, and those 2 degrees were not recognized. So he works at a factory, raising 3 of us. I'm in the middle, and he's on 20K. And at the same time, my mum, equally educated in her own right, was a teacher, and it was really that crossing over from migrating from the Philippines to Australia that I really put to how I gather and recruit my motivation, my level of work ethic, always living in gratitude. But as a child, I had some pretty rough moments. My primary school years were quite tough in that I was bullied a lot. I had my arm broken 3 times and had 16 stitches, for example, before the age of 11. Very traumatic, which has informed my adult life to a point. Working, around that is challenging, but trying to find healthy ways to channel those experiences is one of the biggest things that I keep top of mind. Creativity was a big part of my life. I remember my mum was cooking spaghetti. I was 4 years old in our little apartment, and she said, "Ram, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And that I was distracted because I was always fiddling with something or collecting stuff. I had collected empty tissue boxes, toilet paper rolls, cardboard boxes, always building things. And I said, "I don't know, Mum, I just want to make stuff." She put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to be, make sure you dream big. Make sure you dream much, much bigger." So I had the parenting of this really encouraging style, where anything I wanted to try, my mum would respond with, "Go for it, give it a go, try it out." That really helped my career path because I ended up pursuing design. I actually finished graphic design back in 2004 in college. So that was 20 years ago. We're coming to the end of 2024 now as we're recording this. So 20 years ago, I finished design college. So I pursued a path of design. It really lit me up and enabled me opportunities that my previous generations simply weren't able to access living in the Philippines, which, mind you, is back then somewhat referred to as a third world country. It has
Yeah.
over 110 million people, with, Australia, for context, is hitting around 26, 27 million people. So Philippines has 4 times as many people with 3 times less space than Australia, for example.
Wow.
But look, I'm now in career transition, and we were chatting about this off air, Jason, that I'm now in my third year of Bachelor of Psychology, and I'm pursuing a path to being a psychologist, which for me will be a 7-year journey. I have to do third year, finish third year, which I'm doing part time. I'll finish third year next year, and then I'll do fourth year, which is either honors or graduate advanced diploma, and then 2 years masters. So that's the technical stuff, but I am very much endeavoring a career in psychology. So
So,
there's a lot there.
which is which is which is beautiful. And when I met you, you were on a different path, or you were engaged in something completely different. Although psychology was a big part of the communication methods of how you reached and communicated with all that you did, when you went into the design side, give us a little story about where you ended up. What did you do? I, I, I'm asking you to give people perspective of who I know you are, of the giant, the big thinker that you are, right? Or the giant thinker, I should say. Give us a perspective so that the audience understands what you started when you were at the company. So I think it's Saatchi. Is that
Yes.
the name of it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then from there,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
created your own agency. So a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind, because you traveled to the yes. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, you traveled for a little while.
Yeah. So I've dabbled in quite a lot of different wonderful entrepreneurial experiences, but it sort of stems from my tools and approaches that I learnt from design, and specifically design thinking. So we can dive into a bit of design thinking methodologies, but essentially, although I graduated from graphic design, the principles and the market that design evolved into was really applying the thinking of what do people really need? How do we solve and reduce friction and pain points in any artifact, whether that's a service, whether that's a product, whether that's a website, an app, anything really. So applying that thought, how can I, or we as a service, reverse engineer outcomes that are helpful for people? So I ended up navigating through different agencies. My last role, I was head of digital design at Saatchi and Saatchi, servicing clients like Amex, Qantas, Toyota, primarily. Previous to that, I was design director at DDB, another big global agency, and clients that I worked with, which is all available on my portfolio. If you look online, you can see my work. But I worked on McDonald's, I worked on Audi, and Woolworths, yeah, different sort of global brands. And although I didn't start my own agency per se, I would continue to take on certain projects. And I ended up merging into quite organically to advisory, which is where you and I connect, Jason, and some of our fellow peers in that space. So I ended up sort of navigating my way and really enjoying advisory, which is almost this cross section of allowing people to, and business owners specifically, allowing people to access insights and options from practitioners and somewhat specialists in their field. Imagine assembling your own version of Avengers for a business problem. You might have a CFO, you might have a CEO, you might have a design director or head of digital design. You might have someone that specializes in supply chain or global distribution, growth marketing. Like you can assemble all these different people who become advisors, and they don't have fiduciary responsibility. They instead moment to look at what's going on in your business and strategically ask the question, where do we want to go, and is this, do we have the right strategic play, so an example business case that I'll give you an example straight up of how design thinking applies to a business problem. If we look at a client that I worked with a little while ago, they're a digital men's health clinic, and they were going to release a product to help men in Australia lose weight. They'd previously released products around helping with hair loss, sexual health related matters, psychological health, and they wanted to launch a product for losing weight. They hired me to investigate and look at, what is the real underlying problem. We often talk about segmentation in business, in terms of especially marketing to an audience. I uncovered 5 different segments, but I'll name 3 for that particular use case. There was a group of men who would say to me, Ram, the 3 segments were, your performance Pete's, dad bod Dave's, and obese Oliver's, for example. And
Okay.
performance Pete's would say, Ram, I want to lose weight. And I'd look at them and go, wow, you look incredibly athletic and fit. What makes you want to lose weight? And the performance Pete's was saying things like, I do CrossFit, I run marathons, or I do Ironman, that type of activity, and everything counts. Okay, so that's a particular insight. The dad bod Daves would say things like, I used to be fit, now I've got a kid or 2 kids, and I simply don't have time to exercise as much as I like and eat the way I wanted to, like I did before. That's a separate insight. And then the obese Olivers were clinically overweight, clinically obese, and they would say things like, I can't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. I don't really have a will to live. There's nothing left for me. I'm in a very dark place. So as you can see, this implies that when we use design thinking, we're putting the person and the human in every decision that we make. Because if we launch a product, we have to have it proportional to the problem. I often use the example of the Band-Aid. A Band-Aid works perfectly well for a certain level of pain. But if I was to say to you, Jason, hey, I'm come over for dinner and I'm chopping carrots and I cut my finger and I said, ouch, crap, I've cut my finger. What are you going to say? You're not able to say anything helpful unless you ask the question prior to that, which is, how bad is it? Are you okay? And then I'm going to say, yeah, it's just a graze. Or I'm going to say, oh man, I've cut my finger off. Both will require certain solutions in proportion to the pain. And that's really what I'm really passionate about when it comes to design thinking. It's meeting people where they are and knowing where the experience enters and exits. So the Band-Aid will be perfect for a graze, a little sort of, small little graze or a cut that isn't requiring stitches. And going back to that example of the use case of the three types of gentlemen who want to lose weight, the business ended up offering 2 products. One was injectables, which is actually diabetic medication, to hack into the biochemistry of those who are experiencing obesity. But then meal replacement shakes for the other segments. So I know that was a long-winded way of answering, back to the career trajectory, but design thinking has really been the sort of glue to my approach and my interest. Uh, just to clarify, design thinking as a method isn't linear, but there are five or six stages to it. There's empathy. Who is it that we're looking to understand? Define problem, which is there's a list of problems. Let's prioritize one. Once you get that problem statement from that defined problems stage, we go into ideation. That's the fun bit. But what do most people who launch businesses, products do? They go straight into ideation. But have they really spent the time in empathizing with their customer segment or their person that they're trying to help? Have they scored and prioritized the problem? There's a lot of problems. The world is not in a shortage of problems. And ideating against the problem statement that you and the team have selected. Again, going back to let's go back to a simpler example. There's a market for glue sticks, for arts and crafts. Then if you graduate in the adhesive market, there's stronger glue. There's a whole glue range. But what if glue is not enough? Well, then there's your 3M hooks. But what if you really need to put something down? You got to use nails and drills. Also, I missed in there's tape, also masking tape, duct tape. There is a whole spectrum of specific solutions for people. And when I taught, so the stages, as I said, there's 5 or 6, but empathize with your person that you're trying to help, define problems, ideate, come up with ideas. Then you prototype one of those ideas, and then you test it and iterate it. And it's an evolving artifact.
For you, your biggest accomplishment during that era that you could take back and say, here's what I want to tell my younger self today?
The first thing that comes to mind with that question, what would I tell my younger self, is that your new self will cost you your old one. And the reason why that is so important, and what comes top of mind, is because I believe that the path to where we desire is definitely not a straight one. It will require a lot of curating beliefs and views and noise. It takes a lot of introspection and reflection and testing and iterating, or like designing your life in many ways. In that stage of test and iterate in the design thinking method, it is that, like, people are so scared, and there's that terminology, self-sabotage. I think the reason why there is this existence of that is it all goes back to, do I deserve to have this? And asking yourself of these bigger reflective questions is scary, because who am I to speak on stage, Jason? Who am I to write a book? But not to get all Anthony Robbins on everyone, but it is so true. We are our own worst enemy or our own best friend. And this journey is one that, there's a wonderful quote that relates to this that I love. It's from a woman named Glennon Doyle. She wrote a book called Untamed, and she said, "This life is mine alone, so I have stopped asking people for directions to places they've never been."
It's beautiful.
It is so beautiful and so powerful to instill in us when when is our own voice to pursue the path that we want going to happen? People put things off over and over again. I think the reason why I've done it primarily because I was listening to my mum, who was thankfully, and I'm very blessed to have had that voice early on to say, try it, see what happens.
What the hell do you have to lose?
What have I actually got to lose? And I think,
Yeah.
which is why I'm so passionate about mentorship, my second book, How to Get a Mentor, is because going off that Jim Rohn quote, where the average of 5 people we spend most time with, it's so true. Like if you're around go-getters, I use the example of if you're a runner and you run with everyone so much faster than you, although you might come last, you will still run faster than running with people slower than you. Your time will still be faster. Try it. This is the
Yeah.
same, like when I play tennis, I've adopted tennis and I play with people who are at higher levels than me occasionally. And I just, in my mind, I turn into Roger Federer, but like I feel so much like my shots are cleaner. I have this bravery to take risks. I feel I'm a bit more loose because I'm mirroring them. You know,
100%.
the standard increases when you're around that environment. So get
Yeah.
around people. I would say my younger self, yep, your new self will cost you your old one. Don't believe everything you think. Pause before you respond. Think, is this my voice or is it someone else's? It's okay to say no. What is it that I need? And all of this actually requires compassion for yourself and kindness to yourself. And before I used to think like, no, I'm not deserving of that. Why? Because people literally beat me up,
Yeah.
right? Like I felt like worthless piece of crap.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, you just have to stand up for yourself.
No one's going to show up.
At the end of the day, you've got to do it for you.
Yeah.
And I would just add on there that that ultimately we have so much potential and capacity to help others. And now people ask me what my version of success is, and I say it's how well I go to sleep at night, because I've had a lot, I've had a little, and I've had everything in between. And now I'm no longer searching for the big extrinsic goals, the name on the underneath my business card, the title, the money, the property, the wealth financially. I'm now going, am I happy with who I'm becoming?
Yeah.
Because when you get to that point, it's a whole other game. Like I'm so fulfilled in a role. One of the roles that I now have is, which you may have seen, is Lifeline in Australia. It's a 24/7 crisis support service. So I'm on the phones volunteering and I'm
Yep.
listening and I'm trained now. It's almost coming up to 2 years. It's a long training. It's about 9 to 12 months. And it is listening to people in crisis who specifically, a lot of the times, are thinking about taking their life. So the
Yeah.
service itself in Australia was created 60 years ago for people with crisis around suicidal ideation and, feeling alone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so these are the things I'm exposed to now that I wasn't before.
So our last conversation prior to meeting today, we sat down on, I think on FaceTime or Zoom, and you said, Jason, I am going to stop what I'm doing, or I'm going to jump into my education of psychology. Why is that so important to you?
I'll tell you simply, I realized, and I'm happy to talk about my age because it's important, I think, for context and people might relate. But I'm 38 going on 39, so late 30s. And when I hit all my goals at 30, 32, I was okay for a while, but I realized, and only through introspection, like we touched on earlier, there was this wonderful quote from Jill Ellis. She's the coach of the US female soccer team who coached that team to like 3 World Cup wins or World Cups or something, number one team for many, many years. Please fact check
Yep.
this, but it was on Netflix, and the
It
documentary is
was on
called,
the Playbook. It was called Playbook.
yes, the
Yes.
coaching playbook. Yeah, the coaching playbook, where they interviewed, or sorry, showcased different coaches from different sports around the world. Jill Ellis said this, and this is in answer to your question, which I think will be powerful to reiterate. She said that the mountaintop is small and the air is thin for a reason. We're not meant to stay there. It's borrowed. We're meant to come back down and aim for a new mountain. So the reason why I'm pursuing psychology now, which is a 7-year climb to registration for me, 6 years if you do it full time, but you basically have to give up everything for it,
Yeah.
was that I realized that, number one, I didn't set any new goals or mountains to climb. I stayed up on that mountaintop, having all achieved everything I ever wanted to, some of which I shared earlier. And I started to feel very, it could have been probably elements of depression, but I was very unfulfilled. I was no longer
Yeah.
excited, or I didn't even want to get up in the morning. You do because you're sort of used to it, but I just lost my essence. I lost my drive, and I just was no longer really happy anymore. And so between the age of 32 to 36, I was very much in this lull. And only if people very close to me knew that, because I shared that with them. But I started to really ask questions to different trusted counsel, friends, mentors, family members. And I arrived at this. And my wife really was the one that really helped me cross the line and go over. She said, "What's really bothering you about this decision?" Because I was thinking, psychology, no, it's going to be a long journey. Geez, like, what the hell? Am I going to give up my design identity, my design life? Imagine. And I said, that's what's bothering me. I feel like I'm betraying my identity. And then she said,
Yeah.
"Give me that pen. You give me that pad." I had a pad in front of me. She got a pen. She said, "This is Ram." She drew a stick figure. "This is Ram." She drew a circle around me and around that stick figure. And she said, "This is Ram as a designer." She wrote designer. She drew another circle around that. She goes, "This is Ram as an advisor and a coach." And then she drew another big circle, and she said, "This is Ram who's going to be a psychologist." And then she also drew a little tennis racket in there, right? But what she said was, you're thinking of it as if you're deleting that part of you when you use the words betray, all these things. But really, you're evolving. It's never going to be deleted. It is always a part of you. You're building upon rather than deleting. And the other wise thing she said was, because I said, "Man, I want to be like 43 when I finish studies." And then she said, "You're going to be 43 anyway." And it just clicked.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I really am passionate about and committed to this now is I realize that there are doors I want to open and places I want to go, and more importantly, people I want to help that my
Yeah.
current knowledge cannot take me to.
100%.
That is the
You know,
reason.
you're saying something that one of my mentors shared with me years ago, and it was, when you find something that energizes you, inspires you, has some form of energy that is just from a positive sense, I don't care if it's small or if it's massive, peek into it, grab it, and dive into it until there is none left. And along the way, you will learn, you will experience. And when it dies, if it dies out, there's probably another light or another energy source that will come in that will inspire, motivate, or drive you that you didn't know what was possible because you had to go through that journey.
Absolutely.
right? And so as you were going through that and you declared, you made that declaration, and what a incredible wife. I can't, by the way, I can't wait to meet her one day. I'm telling you, it's like I'm flying to Australia, let's put it that way. You then, how'd you get to the crisis center? Like, how did that connect? Because I can tell you, the the young man at the mailroom was bold. The mother sharing with you that what the hell do you have to lose was truly has always carried you through that whole process. And by the way, that is exactly the same thing my mom told me. Like there's four levels of my mom shared with me. First is what the hell do you have to lose? Really dive into it with the intention, and you alluded to this. Shoot for the sun so you get the moon rather than shooting for the moon to get the clouds, and just push yourself. Second day, she said, what are all the possibilities if you do XYZ? And again, she said, just go. Just stretch yourself. We talked for about an hour. Day 3 came around. She says, so which ones are you willing to let go of? And that was hard, especially when you're really talking about possibilities and be getting excited about it, right? And I see that your journey came from that perspective, and then you completely just you've been working on this refining of who am I today? Because I'm not the same person I was a year ago or 10 years ago. I've evolved, but I have all this base to work from. And then the last day she said, so which one's worse? And so I share that with you because I resonate so much. And that's probably one of the reasons that you and I are we're thousands of miles away, but yet I absolutely love you to death, right? Like you're a dear friend. And with that, crisis center, why?
Ooh, why? I think, well, firstly, I appreciate what you shared there, Jason. That means a lot, and definitely see you as you and I as kindred spirits in many ways. So I resonate with what you shared, and how incredible your mum is as well. Amazing. So why Lifeline crisis support? I always had it in the back of my mind. I don't know why, but I was always terrified. Imagine holding space for someone and not knowing. It's just
That you have their life in in your hands.
oh mate, it's heavy calls. Like not to dive into details publicly about it, but as you might imagine, there are many different versions of crisis. There are many different ways of people arriving there, and to call is in that environment is almost like their last sort of hope, their sort of outreach. It feels like a lot of responsibility, and in many ways it is. But my motivation for doing it, which I started in second year uni, because I was just thinking what would complement my studies. That was one part of it, but really underneath, there's a wonderful sentiment around this that I shared recently, which was, I think people feel driven to take care of others because it heals the part of themselves that also needed taken care of. And I really feel that it all goes back to inner child stuff.
Yeah.
And I also think, and I don't have children yet, God willing, one day, hopefully, right? But it's certainly something that I would love to explore and experience. But I also think, would my future children be proud of what I'm doing? I think role
Absolutely.
modeling is so critical. Like I don't know, there's this idea around love languages. For me, you can buy me whatever, you can say whatever. But for me, you don't need to say anything. I really value action.
Yeah.
So this is me, I guess, eating my own advice and eating my own, attempts to try to meet my own intrinsic needs. I think you get to a point where this idea around when the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of changing, only then you will
Mm.
change. That idea, which you and I
Yeah.
share in a lot, Jason. So it got to a point where it was painful to just keep showing up to the job and career that, quite frankly, I am happy with where I got to. There's always other limits, but did I really want to go further into, bigger and better, and like it just was not calling me. And I feel that my path to psychology and, the lifeline crisis support worker experience that I'm having now, it feels like a vocation. It doesn't just feel like an interesting project. And I was done with interesting projects. It was really calling to me in a vocation like way.
Yeah.
So
So,
each to their
so
own in that journey. Go for it.
for 100%. So one last question. From the mailroom to today, you have had a lot of incredible moments, and yet you have had maybe even a dark moment in time that was difficult for you. Would you mind sharing what that dark moment was for you? And from a context of three questions. First of all, what happened? Who were the people that helped you get through it? What were the tools or resources that you had to engage or create to get you through it? And what experience, looking back now, made you who you are today?
Ooh, look, there's many trying and dark times. Um, but I hear the
From
question.
a,
It's
look at it from let's hear it from,
yeah,
let's look at it because of our audience. Let's look at it from the professional realm.
sure. From the professional realm. Okay. I mean, phew. So the context around, well, it's somewhat personal and professional, and I think it sort of errs and connects to some regard. But um, I think relationships are a big part of our journeys, professionally and personally. Um, I personally had a very abrupt, unforeseen betrayal, you would call it, in my personal life, and that really affected how I operated in my professional world because to some extent, you could look at it as, yeah, like I fueled myself against, as you all know, listening, if you've listened this far, the bullies as well. So I felt like I got taken advantage of. I felt like I was disrespected and all those things. And I sort of have been chipping away at the constant two paths of how do you cope with this? You can cope in a very destructive way. You can even be the bully, to be fair, or you
Right.
can cope in other helpful ways. But the ways that I thought were helpful were not sustainable. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to say suck eggs to the bullies by being so successful, and I'm going to have more of everything that they would never even be able to attain themselves. Like I just came from that very lion like drive, but that's exhausting too, because I was still doing it to prove someone wrong or to prove my value based on external factors like money or investments or titles or awards. And I got a lot of that stuff eventually. But then what? So you asked me people, tools, and the third one, Jason, you said was what? It was
Experience. So
experience.
looking back, yeah,
So the people
what
that,
was the learn?
yeah. the learning. So the people piece, I really go back to foundational family. They really, like, for example, I'll go back to me arriving after the first tour in America, 22 cities, 3 months. I get to the airport back in Sydney. My mum and dad hadn't seen them. I missed Christmas during that period too. First time, I'd done that. And my mum says to me, how does it feel? I said, feels pretty good, mum. She goes, yeah, you climbed up that massive mountain. I said, I sure did. And she said, well, make sure you come back down and share to everyone what you found. And brought me to tears, even getting me goosebumps saying that again. So having people who effectively are encouraging you, yes, keep your head in the clouds, but keep your feet on the ground, your feet on the ground, your feet on the ground. For me, it included my parents. I used, look, I think you don't need many tools, but you do need some. And I go by Abraham Maslow's wonderful quote. He said, and he created Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he said that, well, sure, if the only tool you had was a hammer, then you'd treat everything as if it were a nail. And that idea of, oh crap, like, what tools do I have? So the tools I honestly had, I had to work on myself. I ended up seeing a lot of psychologists, some that you gel with, some that you don't. I got different perspectives, but I really needed to unpack that. And I think, look at Billions, there's Wendy Rhodes, right? It's kind of like that, like a high performance coach or someone that understands your psychology. For me, that would be my sort of
Yeah.
recommendation, to speak to people who can come from a different evidence-based lens that's not your family and friends, because as much as they mean well, they might not be equipped actually to handle the stuff that you're giving
Agreed.
them.
Agreed.
And the learning that I got from that painful experience was that, and if I was to get a tattoo, it'd probably just be this simple, but keep moving forward. Hope,
Yeah.
optimism is actually, and I did an essay on this. Again, I'm only drawing from what I've written top of mind, but like, I wrote about the benefits of and influential factors of self-efficacy, which is self-belief in yourself. And there is a difference between confidence and cockiness, which we won't get into, but essentially I've arrived at confidence is knowing that you can do something competently,
Right.
but cockiness is feeling like you're better than everyone else. So self-efficacy, self-belief, grit, and optimism. And guess what? The optimism piece versus pessimism. Yes, it's easier said than done, but gosh, when you really sit down with it, you're like, the alternative sucks, and they're both free. They're both available to you. They really are available. No one needs to give you permission. You don't need to go collect a ticket to say, yep, I have a certificate of optimism now. They're the main ones. Keep moving forward is the biggest learning. You have to keep going, because the alternative just doesn't help. It's a poor resource allocation to be angry and disappointed, which I carried for many, many years, anger a lot.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I can't thank you enough. And for those to the audience, I just tell you, you have just heard a very wise man and very incredible human being. Here in the Bold Savers, making the impossible possible. Ram, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time, more than you can imagine. So thank you.